right on the zeros and fives, right? We're back with tonight's guest, Teal Inzunza. She gave us a kind of sort of abbreviated little bio about herself, but now we're gonna get into it and the good work she's doing and the organizations that she's with. So we know you're in Flatbush, right? We know you've been a social worker for 15, 20 years, something like that. 15 years?
About 15.
About 15. What's the craziest shit that you've seen?
Oh my God. I have no idea. I mean, I worked for a hotline for 4 years, so you hear all kinds of crazy shit all the time. And like lots of psychosis and lots of people being like, there's cameras in my head and like they put something in my brain. And we've had like people pulling down like our bookshelves and like throwing shit in our lobby. And just like all kinds of just crazy shit. People
Like
cursing you out, like just all the things.
manic episodes. It seems like that's what you're.
Use a cop, you might have to kill.
Just pissed off. Just pissed off, you know? Like people are mad. It's a tough city to live in, you know? Like we don't always have the answers and
No doubt. A lot of
you
mental health
know,
shit.
like it's rough. It's a rough place to be. So
How'd you get in? How'd you get involved? How'd you decide? When did you decide that you wanted to be a social worker?
so when I was 18, I did AmeriCorps and I worked in Queensbridge, um, which is where Nas is from. And
Oh yeah,
know.
we're familiar with Queensbridge on this project.
Most people know Queensbridge. Um,
Yeah.
and I worked there for several years. I worked in community center. And that's where I was really introduced to a lot of community organizing work and a lot of social workers. And I sort of learned about social work through that, like volunteer work. And so I took a year off between college, and then I decided to go into it in college and did a lot of. So I went straight into that. I am Mexican American, and so I did take a year in college and I studied social work in Mexico. And so I got
Ooh,
it.
how was that?
It was amazing. It was like very life changing. Community organizing is very different in other countries. And so it was a really incredible opportunity to learn from people who are organizing in a country that is like overrun by violence in a way that I don't think we quite really understand in the United States. And so they're doing like really incredible work. So, and then I really got started in New York City working with homeless folks. I did housing work and worked with everyone that was in shelter, and I worked housing folks. And then I worked on a hotline for 4 years, working with LGBTQ individuals. Currently, I work for a shelter provider that is the largest DV shelter provider, domestic violence shelter provider in the United States. And I am the program director for their economic empowerment program. So we provide support for folks who are looking to like sort of, get started in their life or restart their life in a new way, sort of financially, career wise. And so I've kind of created that program, which I also did at my last job as well. So it's been a journey, but I've been doing this for a while in a different forms, but that's sort of been my experience.
What's the most rewarding part of the job? What's the most rewarding part of the job, and what's the part of the job that sucks?
I think that when you work with survivors, and I'm also a therapist, so my free time. You are witness to the most horrible things that life has to offer on a daily basis, a minute by minute basis. When I worked on a hotline, I would hear the most horrific things that anybody could ever really imagine on literally you'd be on a shift and you could get a rape call, a hate violence call, an assault call, back to back to back to back to back, a police violence call. You don't get a break, and you hear it every single day for 4 years. You know, you don't, you know deeply the evil that exists in the world, and no, most people don't understand that, and you have to reckon with that in yourself. And you know, you don't get to share that with the people in your life because it's not really a thing that people like to talk about. It's not really fun. And that changes you and that hurts your soul. You don't come out the other side of that being the same person you were when you started. um, and it's hard to witness people's pain, but it's also beautiful because people really do change, and people are incredibly resilient and amazing. And you know, we work with the most incredible people, so it's really cool to see people really take control of their life and take ownership over it and really do incredible things that, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't think I could do that, like having experienced what they've experienced, like being undocumented and leaving an abusive relationship and doing all these things. And you know, I'm like, I don't think I would have the strength to do that, but people really find an incredible amount of strength and resilience. So I'm always in awe of the people that we work with, and seeing, you know, their growth and watching that happen is like the best part for sure. So that's what I would say.
What does your day-to-day look like?
Well, now I'm a director, so I don't have to do all the hard stuff.
Oh, wow. You done
So
forgot where you came from,
I
man.
get
We
to
thought,
I get to do all the supervising and do all the fun creative stuff of like creating new programming and thinking of all the fun new ideas. So I really supervise all of the work that's being done and give a lot of feedback and oversee a lot of the work that my staff are doing. So we do a lot of meetings, case conferencing. I do the supervising of all the cases and making sure people are doing things the right way. And collaborating with our shelter staff and things like that. So it's a little bit crazy. It can look different every day, but less crazy than it did a couple years ago, which I'm very grateful for. So,
Paid your dues.
do you miss the field?
so I'm also a therapist, so that's why I can't quite give that up, because I love working with clients. I don't miss working in crisis work. I don't miss that at all. Much more healthy mentally now that
Yeah.
I don't work in that field anymore. I do miss working with my clients. It was incredibly hard to leave the clients that I worked with for 4 years. You know, some I worked with from the very start of that job. But I don't miss doing that every single day. But I still have clients I see weekly, which I love working with clients. So I do, yeah, sometimes I do wish I saw more clients, but I also have as you probably can imagine, a policy and like a big level thinking brain. So I like doing that. And I think that sometimes we get caught in the day to day of like helping individual clients when I think we could actually make more change on a bigger level that would affect more people. And that's really what I also want to do. So a lot of the work I'm trying to do is change more policy stuff and help more people on that level.
Well,
So.
that's where I was gonna go next. If anybody else had questions or there weren't any questions more about the general stuff, I was actually gonna go to the policy stuff. We actually talked about 4 policy related things that I wanted to talk with you about, but that's actually kind of selfish, right? What's the policy thing what's getting you going now? What is the policy initiative? What are you working on? What would you like to be working on? Like,
You've opened a can of worms. Now I'm going to tell you the thing that's nerdy that I like. So I'm a domestic violence advocate. I work with survivors all day, every day. And a huge area of, abuse that occurs that most people don't understand is around economic abuse, financial abuse, in which, an abuser will, rack up money on a person's credit cards, not pay that. But even more damaging, because if a person does that, you can file a police report. You could, tell the creditor, like, the person did that without my consent, I didn't know. But what is more damaging is something called coerced debt, which is something where a person can coerce someone into signing up for credit in their name, which technically they did do in their own name, but it wasn't consensual because they were coerced into doing it. So under threat, coercion, threat of harm to self, children, pets, others, right? Or tricked into doing it. And there's no remedy for that on a city, state, federal level. So, on average, there was a study that was recently done. Most survivors have an average of $16,000 in coerced debt once they leave an abusive relationship, which is an incredible amount of debt. That is a suffocating amount. And I work with survivors that realize this for the first time. And, I've had clients look at their credit and become suicidal looking at this and be like, I can never get out of this debt. Like, I don't know how to deal with this. So it just
That
becomes
has
something,
benefited you in any way, right?
right? They didn't get to use it. Yeah, it's like somebody else tricked them into doing this, and then they used it, right? So it becomes something that just becomes, we all have debt, right? Like we've all experienced debt, and then we don't even want our own debt. So imagine somebody tricking you into or coercing you into doing it when you don't fully understand it, and then being stuck with thousands of dollars of debt, and then having no remedy for that because people will say it was your fault. Which is a thing we've heard in, rape cases, a thing we've heard in DV cases, all these other things. So it's just something that you can't get rid of. So this is something that I've been working on a city, a state, and a federal level. Policy-wise, there have been 2 states that have been able to file coerced debt laws, Texas and Maine, and I have been working on a federal sort of statute on that, and then also some New York City and state stuff. But I know that you all aren't in New York State, but it is something that is important, and I think would change a lot of people's lives.
It's okay. We've got some New York State listeners and viewers. Go on.
Yeah, so I think that New York City is a pretty progressive city. So I think that there's a mayoral election coming up in June, some preliminary stuff. So I think that now is a good time to bring that stuff up and get people on board. And I think there's interest in it. So we've been working with a lot of different agencies to bring this issue to the forefront. So I hope that people are interested and care about it, because I think this could be something that we could see change in the next, couple of years.
Is there any kind of federal oversight with this kind of thing? Is the CFP involved in this?
So the CFPB is not currently. There's no oversight, and there's also not oversight in VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act. And there is a push to put this stuff in there. So there is currently a bill that's going to Maxine Waters' subcommittee, the financial subcommittee, that just got passed through the House, called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That is an sorry, I know this is kind of boring to a lot of people, but it is a change. It is a change to the previous Fair Credit Reporting Act, and I'm currently editing that with a bunch of other advocates to include this issue into that act. And so if that does get through the Senate, then that will be the first federal protection around coerced debt. But currently not in the CFPB, not in VAWA, not in any other federal protection. There is no other federal protection around coerced debt currently. There is around identity theft, if you did not know, and around economic abuse if you weren't knowledgeable, but not around coerced debt.
What's it like writing legislation?
It's really hard.
Yeah, I've heard.
I'm not a policy person. I'm a social worker. I'm not a lawyer. There's a lot of lawyers in the room that like to talk and hear themselves talk and really focus on a specific word for about an hour, and we only have an hour, and I find that frustrating. But I think it's really meaningful, but it is a little bit like, what is the impact of this? You can't always know what the impact of what you're writing will be. But you do the best you can, and you hope it's going to be good enough at some point. And I'm sure it won't be, but hopefully it'll be good enough for something at some point. And it's not totally great because it's not all of the issues are going to be helped by a credit reporting act, but it'll be something. So
start.
It's a start, exactly. So
I have a question about the economic abuse. So you're saying that there's not a lot of protection around that. That's just, it's so surprising to me that if a person, like I learned in law school, if a person signs a contract but they're under duress, that
Yeah.
there should be some sort of, you know, I don't know, there should be something that's happening in their favor. Do you think it has to do with the fact that it's because it's a domestic situation and not a business related
Yeah,
situation?
well, I agree.
yeah, and it's really hard to prove that you were under duress. Like a lot of people don't want to believe that. Or they'll be like, well, what was this person doing? And they don't, or a lot of people feel a lot of shame about being in a, domestic violence like situation. And so they'll be like, I don't want to share, like I don't want to say, or like they feel really judged. Or it's kind of hard to explain, like nobody necessarily like held a gun to your side and said do this. It could have been implied. And it's hard to sometimes explain to like a creditor who definitely doesn't want to hear it. And they generally kind of like are like think that you're lying. They're coached actually to like be like, these people are lying.
Wow.
Because there's somebody doing a study on identity theft and coerced debt and
Mm.
interviewed a bunch of creditors, and they're coached to like be like, you're lying. So yeah, technically I know that's supposed to be a thing, but there's very few free consumer law attorneys specifically for survivors. So most people are unrepresented and are trying to do this with an advocate, and it's just like not very successful. So unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't go well, especially if you owe a lot of money. They want their money.
Yeah.
Good luck.
They're very pushy,
Nah.
Yeah.
as we all know.
I was gonna say, I can relate. I don't know about anyone else, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, who got you? What you mean?
debt
You been
wise,
under
nobody's. No, I'm not
Oh,
under any.
Student loans, I mean, I
Aw,
think,
love
you
you,
know what I
brother.
mean?
Sean is like, wait a minute.
That's
No,
what
I'm
I was
talking about just
thinking.
my actual debt that I've incurred on my own because of school and
Mhm.
oh
my
yeah.
brother's personal stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my credit card debt isn't too bad, but the student loans.
Yeah, William shows up at my house every month. I don't know what y'all talking about.
You know,
In the short form, he shows up.
I'm trying to think. I don't want to hijack it and just go down the list, but I'm
No,
glad.
go for it.
I'm glad we got
Can
that
I
policy.
ask a question? Can you not hear me?
No, go for
Yeah, we
it.
can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. So earlier I did mention you here that you've worked with people experiencing homelessness. I work for a developer, and a large portion of our portfolio is subsidized housing. So we do work with a lot of people who are more so like transient. I have lots of debates with people about homelessness, mainly because people face it as the issue is restriction to supply. And we know that's not always the problem. And yes, we could use more subsidization to like reach the supply like that people cannot afford to get on their own. But what do you think can be done as far as people, because there are a lot of like mental issues, and maybe not necessarily mental issues. A lot of people don't know how to maintain a household, or say like rent is important and I need to pay it. Are there like any things that you've seen work for people to kind of like keep them in spaces once there is like money and space provided for them?
Yeah, that actually has been one of the like least like important things that I've seen. Like I do a lot of financial education, and most people are really smart with their money. Like poor people are the smartest with their money of anybody I've ever seen. Like they know how to budget better than anyone else. So, and I worked with people on budgeting their money. Obviously, like people have different like ways of doing that. But I think like poverty is also really expensive, and that's part of the problem. Like a lot of the communities that I'm working in, there's one grocery store, and that grocery store is very expensive, and food stamps are not enough, and children are also very expensive. And like you add together like transportation and like all of these things together, it's like an impossible thing to like maintain. And I worked for like a housing subsidy program, and it just becomes like you're working full time. You have to pay for childcare is an incredible cost. Like it's insane the amount of that people pay for like daycare.
Mhm.
You know, it's like all of these costs just like really add up. And if you're not making a lot of money, it becomes really impossible to like be able to survive no matter how much you budget. Like
Mhm.
budgeting just doesn't do it. Like people have the skills, they just don't have enough money.
Mhm.
And like the minimum wage in New York City is $15 an hour, which is better
Mhm.
than most places, but the city is so expensive that it becomes impossible to just like survive. Like I'm work with people that are like doing the best they can, but it's just so expensive. Like it's just impossible. And have like subsidized housing. It just is really,
Yeah, a lot of
really
those
tough.
expenses, they don't like calculate it into, they take their gross and they're like, you can pay a third of this. They don't calculate a lot
Yeah.
of people's extra expenses, yeah,
Right.
into the.
Yeah, because subsidized housing is always like you pay 30% of your income, like
Mhm.
so of your gross income, not your like net income. So it's like before taxes, which is like if I paid 30%
More
of
than
my
half of
income, I
what
was like,
you get in your pocket.
yeah,
Right.
I would not be able to like afford my lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it's just like very, yeah, it's very harsh. It's just like very expensive to be poor. Like I think about that all the time is like everything is so expensive, and it just becomes an incredible, like everything is so horrible. And you live further away, you like have to commute more, you spend more time doing all these other things. Like it's just insane the amount that people have to go through. And you go to all these appointments, and then if you miss an appointment, your benefits are cut off, and then
Mhm.
you have to go through all these processes, and then you miss work, and then you know, and then God forbid you experience domestic violence, and then you miss more work, and then you miss your other appointments, and then you know, it's just like I think there was a study that was done that like when like anybody who is experiencing domestic violence misses out on like $4,000 a year in income or something like that, just
Wow.
by like merely in like wages and things like that. So it's just like
Wow.
expensive to experience these things. It's just like because you end up missing work, or you end up having to take care of your kids, or you end up having to do something. And not everybody has kids, but you know, it's
Yeah.
just it's like the basic things of like access to like affordable food, access to affordable transportation, childcare. Like these things should be more affordable, but they're just not.
Yeah, so
Like and obviously affordable housing, but that's just like not always possibility either.
And it's not always affordable either.
No, and like what they consider affordable isn't affordable. So yeah.
just priced out of the game, pretty much the game of life.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And eating healthy is not cheap in America.
No, it's
Not at
way
all.
more expensive.
Yeah, it's easier to spend $1 at McDonald's for fake food than it is to buy real food.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or like, you know, 25-cent chips, then like whatever.
And a quart of water, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, shit used to keep me alive. Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about your LGBTQ advocacy and work that you've done. Obviously, in the news right now, there are a bunch of states that are passing anti-trans bills. I guess they want to restrict trans athletes from participating in sport. It's even tough for me to talk about. It's just so ridiculous. But like, I'm like honestly,
bathrooms or
Walter
like
and I talked about it. Like,
it's like
I'm
insane.
just wondering, like, when did this become a problem?
It's
Like,
not that it's a problem, right?
I'm trying. Like, this is like sweeping like red states, and it's like taking
It
up
is.
like blue states, and I'm like, this is an issue now. Like, how many trans athletes are? And then I saw I don't know if you guys saw the lady in Texas who just had the impassioned plea, like her daughter, her daughter's trans daughter, and like, like she's like, I gotta fucking move out of the state now. Like, you guys are literally like making my life harder because my daughter could potentially be good at a sport, and I guess ruffle feathers. I don't know. What do you have you now that you're writing? I know it's not your main policy focus, but you are writing legislation now, so that experience is invaluable. Have you looked at these laws? I'm sure you've looked at them, studied them. Like, what are your thoughts, both as a professional and as, you know, liberal New York City social worker?
Advocate, yeah. My one of my best friends works at the Transgender Law Center, and it's an incredible organization. It's nationwide. But you know, every couple of years there's a sweeping of anti-trans bills that just kind of comes across, and a couple years ago it was all bathroom bills. And
Yeah, I
like,
remember that.
I just don't understand.
And I'm
It's
not
like,
laughing
well,
that it's not serious, but
why?
I'm laughing.
I know
Exactly. It's
it's so ridiculous. Yeah, it's bizarre, and it's just like such a hurtful thing. It's just so insane. So you know, I think you know, we were talking about this recently, and sort of like why we think this is coming up. And I'm obviously not like the most impacted or the person that is the most knowledgeable about this, but you know, what we were talking about was because of, you know, Biden's, you know, election inauguration and January 6th, I think because of that, a lot of these bills have started like that. It was a planned thing. Like if Trump didn't win, these bills were going to start going through, because I think there was a lot of red states that are worried like the liberal agenda is like going to be pushed, and like VAWA is going to get passed, which is like too liberal for them. And like it actually, VAWA is the only federal protection for LGBTQ individuals. So like anti-discrimination protection. So they're like, because it was on hold because it wasn't getting recertified during Trump. So they were like, oh, now it's going to get recertified. So now we need to discriminate because all these liberals are not going to be in power. So that's my take on it. I could also be totally wrong. But I have a feeling it's very reactionary towards, you know, the inauguration and having a new sort of, you know, like group of people in power. And it seems to be like that. Like, I think a lot of like bathroom bills were after like the Senate flipped or the House flipped. And like, it just kind of seems to be really reactionary because they start
that was
out.
That was a midterm thing. And it was, I mean, not only was it stupid, it was just politically disastrous for like Republicans. I mean, they lost a bunch of like state houses, and they already dominate state houses, but they lost like in very winnable states because, you know, businesses are like, this makes it harder for us to operate. Like, why are you doing this?
And a lot of businesses lost money too.
Yeah, man. Michael Jordan never says shit about anything other than money. He's like, I don't know about these trans bathroom bills. You know it's a problem. Like, if you're forcing people to say shit that don't want to say shit.
Right.
We have economic empowerment. I know that was part of it too. And again, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I think I got your bio first. And so like I was really reading it and like formulating what I was going to ask. Two issues now: minimum wage, and I think Bernie Sanders just introduced a free college bill maybe today or yesterday. He's going to tax the hell out of rich people to pay for it. I have not an ambivalent view on both, but kind of sort of maybe different than what most would expect. Mm-hmm. I have student debt. Like I do. I haven't really had to pay like much of it since the pandemic started, which has been, but like eventually it's going to get started again. I'm going to have to start paying it again.
May not. I'm holding out for hope that something's going to happen. And then
you think it's going to happen?
Yep.
I do.
I'm like right at. I'm like right.
Some of it.
Some of it. Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends
not all of it.
How much 10 grand won't do shit for me. 50 grand would be nice. 10 grand won't do shit for me.
50 would help.
The interest. Nice. Just stop the interest, and I can get a handle on it.
Right?
I'll figure it out.
Right. Your social worker, you've obviously been working with impoverished people working for. Be like, how fucking much is cutting student debt going to help like the people that you work? See, I'm of the idea that while it helped me, like I went to college, like fucking most Americans didn't go to college. Definitely most minorities don't go to college. Definitely most Black people don't. Most Latinos don't. So it feels like the student debt push is like coming from maybe like the upper income, the upper economic aspects of like of groups that have been historically disadvantaged and marginalized. Again, I'm not
I
against.
get what you're saying. I do think that the Black and brown people that did go to college all have a shit ton of student debt, though.
I'm one of
I
them.
don't think a lot of the white people that went to college have a lot of student debt, to be quite honest. Because most of the people I know that are white that went to college have like no student debt, miraculously. I have no idea how that happened. It seems like a miracle.
Black women are probably most impacted by student debt.
They are.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that, like, I think it has to be also, like you were saying, I think probably earlier, like it has to be like coupled with free college. Like, I don't understand like why college is so expensive. It's insane that college is so expensive in this country.
Especially when you need it to get so many jobs. It's like, how are you going to get ahead where you're required to have minimum college education for a job, but then college is insanely expensive. And then you have to get all this debt, and then you get the job, but the job doesn't pay enough to pay off the debt. And it's just like ugly cycle that keeps going, and it just keeps getting more and more expensive.
America, baby. It's
Yeah.
hustle.
Capitalism.
we're covering
Lock you
well,
down early.
yeah, we're my econ class, I'm doing the Operation Varsity Blues, like the college admission scandal, and it does a pretty good job of explaining like why college is so much now and why like
it's a business.
Billionaires are like willing to do everything to like get their kids into like, San Diego State and shit. And I'm like, okay, like it really is a business order. That's what it is. Like it's almost like a racket, because what you touched upon is so key. Like there's so many jobs that like you have to have a college degree for. So everybody's kind of sort of in cahoots. It's almost like colleges are like minor league systems for like the professional world. And so like it's almost like a weeding out process. The better farm teams, the better farm teams, the better professions, the better professions go from the quote unquote better, meaning the ones that make the most money, law, finance, even higher academia.
And law is not always.
Law
is if you're lucky.
Yeah, there's certain schools that they go for, and it becomes not about the education, because the education is virtually the same across the board. It's like the brand name of the school, like that's where it is, and these schools they can charge fucking whatever they want to, and like people will drive to pay it.
Obscene amounts of money. It's
insane. Like if I went to college now, my shit would be $70 a year.
And I was about to say, Sean, I think we looked at NYU's like $75,000 a year now, some shit like that.
Wow.
That doesn't even include like housing.
No.
Like a meal plan.
Based to it.
Yeah, it's like it's almost to the point where it's like if you aren't uber wealthy, like you're going to have to take out these loans.
25 years, I need a fucking butler.
If you're like, do you really even need college? Because so often your parents' connections are what get you ahead anyway.
Or there's part of that. There's definitely part of that.
The big deal.
Again, it's the fucking. It's the industry. It's the system though. Like most quote unquote white collar jobs require college, right? Yep. And then even what used to be called advanced apprenticeships, right? Now we call it grad school. Like you gotta have a college degree for a lot of those too.
I see social work jobs that are asking, they're going to pay you $40,000 a year. They want a master's.
Yeah, degree. They want.
I'm like, are you insane? you know how much debt somebody goes into to get a master's degree, and you're going to pay them $40,000 a year. That's criminal.
I know a lot of social workers that have to have more than one job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the pay, I mean, and the pay in comparison to what you have to do as a social worker, it's like insulting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's misogyny, right? Like, that's just like, because it's a traditionally like feminine field. Like,
Yeah.
traditionally women work in that field.
Yeah.
Like not a very valued field.
Value, but the work is so important.
Yep.
Right.
Very
Social work,
lowly paid. Yeah.
teaching, nursing, like all of those are like the extremely underpaid.
I can't co-sign with nurses because nurses are making bank,
overworked
Those
like
and
crazy.
nurses get paid. All my nurse friends are doing
getting paid.
well.
You guys
Good.
sound like your nurse friends are they probably went to college.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
nurse friends did go to college.
Yeah, there are a lot.
You mean nursing techs or you mean RN/BS?
Newer nurses had to go to 4-year college. Older ones didn't.
Right. Well, there's still RN programs. There's RN programs. Deltec got an RN program.
My
It's not
homegirl's
4 years.
No, it's just 2.
my homegirl's an RN
You not have to
MBA.
go to school either.
But like
It's
again,
usually
it's
2
like
years and you're done.
2
bunch of
years
college.
at the
I'm
tech
about to come
school.
up. I'm
Yeah.
about to change my career, y'all.
No, if I were smart enough to be a nurse, then I'd get into nursing, but I do not have the brain for that.
I just
I don't
can't
like
do
people
it.
enough. That's the issue.
I don't like people.
And nobody wants a mean nurse, so I'm gonna just stay over here.
I'll be an ER RN. Ain't nothing wrong with you, man. Get back in your car. Leave me alone.
Yeah, all right.
Take it off.
Yeah, all right.
Get out of my face.
The patient first.
Nurse Walter, come back to the office, please.
You need a doctor.
And then I guess fine because this obviously hits closer to home, even though I think it affects probably the population that you used to work with the most. As far as because you actually, when you talked about the lost money due to DV, you were all talking about in terms of wages and not necessarily salaries. Of course, salaries are a privileged thing. Also, the raising of the minimum wage. That's what do you think as far as economic empowerment is concerned? Is that big deal, medium deal, small deal, no deal? Like, where do you put it?
I mean, I think that's a huge deal. People need money to survive. I think what is the national like minimum wage is like $7.25 or something like crazy.
That is correct.
Like that. That's like
That is
insane.
correct.
How do people live off of that? That's like insanity. I mean, I remember when New York City was like trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and then people were like, it's never going to happen, and then it did. And and people still can't live off of that here. I mean, because the cost of living here is so insane. And it obviously isn't the fix to everything. I think the major issue is if you raise minimum wage, you also need to raise the public benefits restrictions. So they didn't change the public benefits like caps. So they raised minimum wage, but now people are making minimum wage, but they're over the caps. So they don't get food stamps or public assistance or, and they still aren't making ends meet. Obviously, that people survive off of those things. So that is one critique I would make of if we raise minimum wage, we also need to adjust.
Like, we give you a promotion, but you can't work no more overtime.
Sorry. Yeah. But I think people like $7.25, like, I don't know where people could live in this country and live off of that, I truly don't know. Maybe there's somewhere, but
and live alone. That would be a situation where you have to have some sort of support.
Yeah.
If you're already living somewhere where another person can take care of a lot of expenses, and then you're just kind of bringing in, but
$7.25 is $58 a day. You work 5 days a week. That's what? $290. Oh, so what is that? That's like it's like $11.60. That's like $11.60 a month, something like that.
Gotta get you an OnlyFans.
And that's
Yeah.
And
A lot more than
Wow.
$11.50 a month on OnlyFans. That's right.
1160 a month is tough. You need you need Mississippi,
Public
Alabama,
housing. You need public
Arkansas, something
housing.
like
That's what
that.
you need. Yeah.
Maybe you
a
can make
roommate,
it happen
you
now.
need 3 roommates.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you have 3 kids and you make that amount. You
Can't
can't
do it.
you can't survive. Like
Yeah.
Can't
you
do it.
just I mean, I think having a higher minimum, and I know the critiques of like having a higher minimum wage is that companies can't afford it, people are going to get laid off. But New York did it.
They can afford it. I don't
can
believe
afford
they can
it.
afford.
They
I
can-
believe
like-
they can afford
They
it.
can
Like the
afford it, yeah.
CEOs don't need to get the bonuses they're getting.
Yeah,
They
and
can
even
afford it.
the
They would
smaller
choose to lay
businesses
people off. Yeah.
figured it out. Like it was fine. Like there's a lot of small businesses in New York City. Like
So the argument becomes how many more self-checkouts do you want in your stores?
Yeah, that's what it is. Because you can definitely have a higher minimum wage, but as
So like at the Wally World by my house and the Target by my house, right?
Mhm.
They
they're
have
not doing
eliminated.
that though.
What'd
But
you
none
say?
of those registers were ever open anyway. The people were doing something else.
Exactly.
Doing that. It's
Registers
the same
open.
minimum
You got a
wage.
store with like 20 registers, and there's always only 3 people
So
working.
I can only tell you
So
my
much
experience.
money just putting those registers in there. You could have paid someone money for the registers. They just want to make the store look full.
I'm
Like,
just
come
telling
on.
you that they're willing to take more shrink, more
Mhm.
theft than to
Mhm.
hire another person.
I agree with Walter. And also, but we're also seeing the counterbalance of that, right? Which may be a good thing. We're seeing UBI being introduced in local levels for sure. People are like,
me,
the state, we're going to pay you.
I literally was at the Royal Farms the other day, right? And they now have all self-checkouts except for
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Yeah.
So I went to the cigarette line and I said, I'm going to pay for it. You can pay down here. No, I want to pay you, human being, not the machine here to take your job. You fucking
I
idiot.
don't work.
Yeah. So the CVS down for me, like they don't have the human register. It's all machine checkout or whatever. The humans are
You
there.
guys never went to the counter in the CVS with the self checkouts and there was nobody at the register and you had to
Hell
chase
yeah.
someone down and check. That's my experience in life. So like it's not like they fired anybody to get the self checkout.
Yeah. It seems like they're doing more inventory, right? Like they're doing more stock stuff because they definitely are checking people out.
Yeah, I just think that but that's what happens, right? So even at the airports now, when I was traveling just now, the freaking restaurants and airports are self-checkout. You literally go to a kiosk, type in what you want, and somebody in the back makes it, and they call your number, and there's no human interaction whatsoever.
We shouldn't fear that though. Like that should free if we do this correctly policy wise, right? You can raise the minimum wage. Walter's right. It's going to cut jobs. It just makes too much sense business wise not to.
I don't think it's going to cut the jobs that we think it's going to cut though.
Yeah, it doesn't, because there's always the people that don't know how to use the self checkout. So you have to have like 2 people there being like, do, or this is how you use it.
Yeah.
There's like 5 old ladies that can't push the buttons.
But that's what I'm saying though. It's like
facilitating how the
you guys are saying
going.
You guys are saying like there's gotta be
it's not what you think it is. That's not how it works. The self-checkouts are everywhere, no matter if the minimum wage is $15 an hour or not. I live in a city that it is. And there are human people working in the stores, and there are also machines. Like it's
so if I'm a business, while New York City is one of my big volume stores, it's gonna be different capacity of people at the CVS in New York, okay, because I got 10,000 people a day going through my store versus the one in middle America where I've got 15 people a day going through. I'm gonna have a manager and that's it. I'm not gonna hire anybody else. That'd be dumb.
You're not gonna have a manager doing inventory though. Like that's not how a store works.
So I'll have overnight stock and that's it. There's no reason for me to have people there during the daytime. Why waste the money? I'll pay less in insurance. I'll pay less in cost for overhead, and I'll have less for running the business insurance. So I'll be less across the board by having.
So if someone has trouble with the machine, you want them to call your number on your phone, in your cell phone, and you're gonna come to the store and help them check out?
I'm just telling you what happens right now. I live in small town America, and I'm telling you that
there's no one in the store.
I'm telling you, there's one person.
The
Yeah,
CVS
many
down, the
orders
CVS
for?
down the CVS on Charles and what is that? Like Cross has like
Eager
two
or
people.
no?
Like
But what I'm saying is
now
before
where I'm
they
in
had
Florida, has like two
self-checkout, there
people
was
in
one or
it
two
now.
people in there to begin with.
It might be one or two people that you see, but you don't know who's in the back doing what.
Right, you don't know who's in the back doing what or anything. I'm just saying that I can reduce cost by 50% because I'm eliminating healthcare, I'm eliminating employee payroll tax, I'm eliminating insurance, all that stuff I don't have to pay now, plus the $15 an hour.
I get
Which is-
what you're
which is
saying.
all
You have
right,
two
which
people
is-
in the store to begin with, and you have the same one or two people in the store. You're not cutting anyone.
No, but you had more than one or two people. You had two people on the floor plus two people behind the cash register. I'm getting rid of the two people behind the cash register.
We used to go to those big box stores. There's usually a bunch of lines and a bunch of people, doing it, whatever, like a Home Depot or whatever,
Right.
There are people, they're just like
Home Depot,
walking
Kmart.
around or they're doing something else. I haven't noticed a reduction of people working in the store with self-checkout.
Well, I have significantly.
Yeah, I haven't. I've just seen
I
maybe
haven't.
in like the
They may be
actual
watching you or sitting at the
registers.
little
But yeah,
booth.
there's always somebody moving around doing
There's
something.
one person
Like,
that
you
can
never know
watch.
when there's going to be an influx of people, so there's always got to be someone there to be like, all right.
Oh, they always know it's influx. Are you kidding me? They absolutely know when it's influx.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but sometimes
So
it's
we got-
unexpected, so you got to
It's
have
negligible.
somebody there ready to go.
It's negligible, but to say that it wouldn't reduce, that there would be, it doesn't make any sense to say we can raise the wage and nothing detrimental will happen or whatever.
Right.
Like, something bad.
It's not the self-checkouts, though, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, sure, yeah, well, sure, that's fine. That's fine. No, and again, I'm for automation. Like, if we do this correctly, policy-wise, we can usher in like a golden age with a minimum wage that's raised that will result in job losses, but that's where you couple it with UBI, though. Like, the state has to, just like with Corona, the state has to have, I don't want to scare Republicans, but the state has to be involved in this. Like, it has to be. Imagine the economic impact that would happen if minimum wage was raised, right? Whatever jobs were lost, and the CBO, I think for the budget where they had the minimum wage, I think they said it'd be like 1.5 million jobs over the course of like 10 years, which isn't, it's not a lot, right? If you look at it over the long stretch. But imagine if every January 1st, every single American got, I think the original proposal was the poverty limit.
$12,000. Yeah.
Yeah, poverty limit. It's like 24 for a family or whatever, and I think it's 12 or 15 for an individual. What if that was just dropped in January 1st, right? That's almost like a stimulus every year. That doesn't mean that you still have to look for work. Things would still be hard, but you would have that there. And
So
as
what
a
happens to the
result,
value of the dollar when that happens?
well, the value of the dollar, the crypto law professor would say that's fucked anyway, right? So the crypto law professor would say, take your money and put it in cryptocurrency, right? And lock it in. I'm not necessarily worried about inflation, only because we have a ton of dollars out there right now, and we keep trucking. Like, I don't hear anybody on Wall Street saying that inflation is going to be an issue. So if we're giving money to companies, why don't we just give it to people?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's super populist. But if you couple it, if we do this right policy wise, which is the promise of a Democratic presidency with, a Democratic House and Senate, like, we could usher this in. Like, it's not even like wild or crazy ideas. It's just a matter of, can we make the politics work?
But you need a supermajority. It wouldn't just be a Democrat. You have to have a supermajority in both.
Oh no, I'm talking about moving the ball forward, though. Like, it's not for me, federal legislation, like, that's, I mean, it's great when that can happen, but a lot of these things need to happen on a local level. Like, New York City hasn't waited for the feds to move to $15 an hour. They did it themselves. Maryland is even, I think, moving to 12 next year, something like that.
It was Delaware. I think Delaware is at 11 or 12.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's where it is. That's where we are. But that's pretty good. That's about 50 minutes. Teal, do you have any organizations, people, anything you want to plug, literature, writing, anything?
Myself? Not really.
We'll definitely have your social media and stuff on the write-up for sure.
On social media like that, so, but I'm happy. I don't have Twitter, I'm sorry. I'm not a Twitter person.
How will we find you?
My Instagram is silly color teal. You can look me up. I work at the Urban Resource Institute, so sometimes some of my writing and things are posted there in New York City. Yeah, I don't know. I have a couple articles that I've been quoted in on Market Watch and a couple different places that is on the website if you look for the Economic Empowerment Program there, so you can check those out.
All right, and I'll make it easier for the folks also. I'll try to search some of those things out myself and put it in the write-up. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Nah, that was really good. All right, let me stop recording.